Welcome to this programming tutorial. Today we will be looking at selection statements and relational operators. Often in programming, you will not know what the outcome will be. For example, you may not know what age a user will input, or what direction a user will travel in. This is where selection statements come in, as they can help you branch to different paths in your program. Imagine if the fox was going out to meet some friends. We could perform a check on its way out. If the day is very cold, then the fox will wear a coat. If the day is very hot, then the fox will wear sunglasses. If the day is anything but very hot or very cold, then the fox will not wear anything. We can also make branching paths nested inside branching paths. For example, if the day is cold, then the fox will wear a coat, and then it will check if the car is charged. If the car is charged, it'll go out in the car, else it'll walk. Now let's look at how that works in programming. Let's build a quick program that asks the user to enter an animal, and then ask questions about that animal. First, let's ask the user to enter an animal, and then we will store the user input as a string. Next, let's create a selection statement block. A selection statement is what lets you branch paths in your program. Whenever you create a selection statement, you must always start with an if block. An if block starts with if, followed by brackets, followed by curly brackets. Inside the first set of brackets is a condition that is either true or false. If that condition is true, then the program will go inside of the curly brackets and will run any instructions inside it. Please note that you can only use an if statement once, and it must always go at the start of your selection block. You'll see what this means as we continue. Let's write a condition to check if the animal entered is a fox. We can do this by using a relational operator. A relational operator checks the relation between two pieces of data. In this case, we will want to check the relation between the user input and the string fox. To check that they are equal to each other, we can type out two equal signs. If you remember, one equal sign assigns data to a variable. Two equal signs is used to check if a piece of data is equal to another piece of data. If our condition returns true, and the user did enter the word fox, or lowercase, then the program will go into the curly brackets. We can space out the curly brackets a bit to make it a bit easier for us to read. Let's output you chose a fox when the user enters a fox, and let's test our program. As you can see, I've entered the word fox and the program has gone inside the curly brackets and executed the output command. This is because the condition we set returned as true. In other words, the condition is correct. What if the user enters a raven? Let's go back and add another part to our selection block. This time we will use the else if statement. You can have as many else if statements inside each selection statement. However, it always goes after the first if statement. You cannot start a selection block using else if. Let's set the condition to check if the user has inputted a raven. In the curly brackets, we will output you chose a raven. You could create this as a separate selection block by writing if instead of else if. However, we want the user to enter either a fox or a raven. We only want one of the instructions to run. This way we check if the user enters a fox, and if they haven't, then we check if they've entered a raven. This uses less processing than checking if the user enters a fox, and then checking if the user enters a raven. Using else if helps prevent unnecessary checks. If the user enters any other animal, we want to account for that. But there are many animals that exist. Let's make it easier by using an else statement at the bottom. Else has no condition and is like a bucket that sits at the bottom of a selection block. It catches any other inputs. You can only use the else statement once per selection block, and it must always go at the bottom. Let's add curly brackets and output you have not entered a recognized animal. Let's run our program. If we enter raven, we get the proper output. If we enter Fox, we get the proper output. If we enter anything else, we get the proper output. One last thing to note, you do not need to use else if or else if you don't need it. However, you must always use if to start a selection block. Let's ask the user another question inside our if statement. We will ask how many legs a fox has. Keep in mind we want to check the numeric values, so I will store the user input as an integer and use the conversion method to convert user input into an integer. Let's create a new selection statement block by typing if. The condition we are checking is if the user has entered 4, in which case we will output correct. Else, if the user has entered anything below 4, we will output too low. Else, if the user has entered anything above 4, we will output too high. Notice the new relational operators we are using. These operators mean less than or greater than. We won't add an else statement in this selection statement block. Let's repeat the same question and selection block in the Raven section, but this time we will just use the else statement to catch any errors. Let's run our program and check the fox. We will enter fox, then we will enter 4, and as you can see, we get the correct output. Let's run our program again and enter fox. Then we will enter 2. As you can see, the program realizes we are less than 4. Let's run our program again and enter the Raven. Then we will enter the word 2. Notice we get an error because the user has entered a string when we are trying to store it as an integer. It is important that you understand that any selection block inside selection blocks are known as nested selection statements. This is because they are nested inside each other. There are also many types of relational operators you can use. Equal to, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and not equal to. The not symbol is represented as an exclamation mark. Practice using these selection statements in order to build your confidence in using them. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you have found it helpful.